This is AMTV in colour.
Hello there everyone, and welcome to part 11 of this series looking at the history and impact of Doctor Who ratings. If you're joining us for the first time, a very warm welcome to you. We hope you stick around for future instalments and check out our previous episodes. But for now, sit back, relax, and join me once again as we delve back into the wonderfully niche world of Doctor Who ratings and viewing figures. Our destination? Season 11. In the last few months of 1973, Doctor Who officially crossed the 10th anniversary line, a feat that not many shows both back then or even today get to achieve. Season 10 had proved to be another peak for the show, both in terms of the quality of the stories being written, but also in viewer reactions, and perhaps most importantly for the BBC, the viewing figures. A very impressive sign that this 10-year-old show still had a lot of life left in it. However, as Season 11 approached, it would mark the end of quite a few things that made early 70s Who so successful. Namely the departure of leading actor Jon Pertwee, whom after 5 years in the role, decided that it was finally time to move on. This would also mean the gradual retirement of the unit regulars, as well as key members of the production team, including producer Barry Letts and script editor Terrance Dicks. But with one last set of stories to create, the production team, undaunted by the immense success of the 10th anniversary, set about once again to craft new adventures throughout time and space. The production team, undaunted by the immense success of the 10th anniversary, set about once again to craft new adventures throughout time and space for the Doctor to explore planets, meet new friends, and fight evil monsters along the way. So as we gear up to say goodbye to the Pertwee era, let's go through his final 5 stories, and see if they continued the rating success built up over the past 4 years. The first story from Season 11 is The Time Warrior. Investigating the disappearance of several scientists, the Doctor and journalist Sarah Jane Smith discover they are being abducted through time by the Sontaran warrior Lynx, who is stranded in medieval England. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 15th of December 1973 and concluded on the 5th of January 1974. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and whilst all numbers are decent, we seem to be a bit all over the place. The story starts with a strong 8.7 million tuning in for part 1, before diving to 7 million and then to 6.6 over the next 2 weeks, before gaining a massive 4 million boost for the final part, which showed the story's peak at 10.6 million viewers. This is undoubtedly the most inconsistent the viewing figures have been for a Pertwee opener, but having said that, both parts 1 and 4 were able to make it into the top 40 TV programmes for their respective weeks, part 1 coming in at 34th, and part 4 charting highest for the story, coming in at 22nd. So just what on earth contributed to these figures being so wildly sporadic? Well, it's not like people didn't know Doctor Who was coming back. The 10th anniversary of Doctor Who had happened a few weeks before the Time Warriors transmission, and as such, numerous stars of the show, past and present, popped up on various news programmes as well as children's shows like Blue Peter to celebrate the milestone and discuss the upcoming Season 11. The Radio Times, then still a powerful promotional tool for any programme, went ahead and gave Doctor Who the prestigious front cover for a 5th year in a row, meaning that all of Pertwee's season openers got some sort of coverage on the magazine, a feat never to be repeated in the classic era. As always, we have to ask, what was the competition up to over at ITV? Were they airing anything through the Time Warriors broadcast that was contributing to the ratings divide in the middle? Well, despite the regionalised structure of ITV at the time, for 3 out of the 4 weeks that the show was on, it was mainly facing off against one programme rather than several. Part 2 went out against Sale of the Century, which, if you watch this series, you'll know has a history of negatively impacting on Doctor Who's viewing figures. Parts 1 and 3 went against a talent show, New Faces, which was exceedingly popular at the time, and it could have contributed, particularly to Part 3's lower ratings of 6.6 million. For Part 4, several different programmes aired in several different regions, but these were mainly repeats of American shows, such as Kung Fu, Candid Camera, and The Partridge Family, competition which didn't seem to bother the Time Warrior too much that week, as that was when we saw the peak rise to 10.6 million. This story also marks the first appearance of the Sontaran warrior race. We are introduced to the sinister Lynx, a warrior operating solo, utilising tech from the present to influence the past. While some commenters joke at the rather baked potato look of the creature, something that still gets bandied about today, Lynx is both an intimidating and formidable opponent for the Doctor to face. I would argue it's not the greatest Sontaran story to have aired, but as an introduction, it works rather well. I mean, after 10 seasons, Link's finally asked the most obvious question people had had on their minds for a decade, and it actually gets an answer.
What is your native planet?
Gallifrey. I am a Time Lord.
Ah, yes.
That's right, we learned from a very quick line that the Doctor is from the planet Gallifrey. And that's all the knowledge we get for now, but trust me, lots of Gallifrey is going to be coming up over the next few years of the show. Overall, this story attracted an average of 8.2 million viewers. This is sadly a 2.1 million decrease from Season 10's opener, The Three Doctors, but you have to cut it some slack. The Three Doctors gimmick was bound to pull in those extra viewers. A Baked Potato Man? Maybe not so much. However, this is far from a poor showing, and it actually matches the average gained by the very first Jon Pertwee story, Spearhead from Space, which aired 4 years prior. Whilst it may not have kicked off Season 11 with the 10 million plus figures the BBC could have been hoping for, The Time Warrior still serves as a great introductory tale for not only the Sontarans, but arguably the most beloved classic Who companion, Sarah Jane Smith, played brilliantly by Elizabeth Sladen. A plucky journalist, Sladen's combination of wit, charm and warmth makes Sarah an instantly likeable character to the audience. It's a great result, especially after Katie Manning's departure as Jo broke so many hearts 6 months earlier. Introducing a new companion, and one whom audiences would take to in a similar vein, was essential, and an aspect in which Elizabeth delivers right from the get-go, and would continue to deliver her brilliance for nearly the next 40 years. To enjoy The Time Warrior today, in the written form you have the Target book from 1978, and its audiobook adaptation from 2008. To watch it you have a VHS release from 1989, or via a DVD that was released in 2007. It may not be one of my favourites amongst the list of stellar Pertwee stories, but to introduce the Sontarans and Sarah Jane, whilst delivering a rare historical outing for the Third Doctor, all has helped the Time Warrior become an enduring classic to many a Whovian. Give it a watch if you get the chance.
Brigadier, a straight line may be the shortest distance between 2 points, but it is by no means the most interesting. Goodbye, old chap.
The second story from Season 11 is Invasion of the Dinosaurs. When the Doctor and Sarah return to London, they find it deserted, with prehistoric monsters roaming the streets. A group of idealistic fanatics are determined to obliterate history in their quest for a new golden age. This story is comprised of 6 episodes, which began airing on the 12th of January 1974 and concluded on the 16th of February. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 6 episodes, and wow, this is certainly a big jump up that I wasn't expecting. The first 3 parts all saw above 10 million viewers, the peak being a tie between parts 1 and 3, which both pulled in 11 million viewers. However, with the last 3 parts, we see that there's quite a drop. Gone are the 10 million plus, with parts 4 and 5 pulling in 9 million, and part 6 attaining the story's lowest rating with 7.5 million watching. The numbers for the last 3 parts, whilst lower, are hardly terrible, and in terms of performance, the first 5 parts all placed within the top 40 programmes. The winner being part 5, which placed 23rd despite having 2 million less viewers than when the story began. So even though there was a very strong start, what caused Invasion of the Dinosaurs to lose a big chunk of viewership halfway through? Well, outside of normal competition and promotional factors, there was something bigger going on in the UK at the time of Invasion of the Dinosaurs broadcast.
As Prime Minister, I want to speak to you simply and plainly about the grave emergency now facing our country. We are limiting the use of electricity by almost all factories, shops and offices to 3 days a week.
In early 1974, the government imposed a 3-day week, meaning that electricity consumption was being restricted to all sectors, and one of them, of course, was television. The BBC and ITV were forced to shut down at 10:30 PM each night in order to conserve power, but oddly enough, this didn't seem to have hindered Doctor Who at all. The restrictions were lifted for the BBC on the 8th of February, one day before Part 5, due to an upcoming last-minute general election. But for Parts 1 to 4, all going out despite these restrictions, if anything, more homes were watching than ever before, so I don't think the 3-day week negatively impacted Doctor Who, despite a similar power dispute causing the show to lose ratings happened only 2 years previously, due to a miners' strike. A miners' strike did happen again in 1974 at this time, but it seems that even though homes lost power sporadically, a lot of homes were still tuning in. Back in the regular factors of promotion and competition, Invasion of the Dinosaurs shone in both categories. The story received some really lavish artwork in the Radio Times, and Jon Pertwee appeared on Blue Peter, armed with his latest vehicle, the Whomobile, which would be seen for the first time in the story. In terms of competition, ITV decided its main contender against Doctor Who would be a variety show hosted by Rolf Harris. This wasn't the case in all regions, and some of the smaller ones opted for programmes that we saw go up against the Time Warriors some weeks prior. None of them seemed to greatly affect the story. I mean, none of them had dinosaurs or a Who-mobile, so that's something to bear in mind. However, despite strong promotion for the serial and relatively weak competition, 2 announcements came during Dinosaurs' broadcast that would shock the world of Who fandom. The day before Part 5 went out, it was announced that Jon Pertwee would be leaving Doctor Who after 5 seasons, at that time becoming the longest-serving actor in the lead role. His decision to leave hardly comes as a surprise. With the death of his close friend Roger Delgado and the departure of his long-standing companion Katie Manning, the family element Pertwee had enjoyed in his first few years simply wasn't there anymore, and it was time to move on to pastures new. Whilst many were shocked, as some fans had only ever known Pertwee as the Time Lord, viewers didn't have time to think about it for long, as exactly 1 week later, on the 15th of February 1974, Tom Baker was revealed to be the 4th actor to take on the role of the Doctor, to debut at the end of the year. Baker was known by British audiences for his roles in movies, and in some TV shows too, but little did we know what was to come from him once he had hold of the TARDIS keys. But more on that when we get there. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9.6 million viewers, a nice 1.4 increase from the previous story. I would say this is a showing of what strong promotion and strong story elements can achieve. The inclusion of ever-popular dinosaurs, a new vehicle for the Doctor, the unit regulars, all of which I would argue help give this story its boost on initial transmission. The 9.6 million figure also makes it one of the most viewed Pertwee stories of the entire era. In today's standing, Invasion of the Dinosaurs is often sadly laughed at. Sure, the dinosaur effects are arguably far from convincing, but this was a TV show in 1974 with a very small budget trying to implement effects on a Hollywood-esque level. The importance is in the story, and being the last script from legendary writer Malcolm Hulke. It's another home run. There's many a touching and poignant moment within this serial too, whether it's between the unit regulars or with the Doctor's stark warning to the Brigadier at the end. Invasion of the Dinosaurs is a story that takes itself seriously, regardless of any wobbly effects. If you want to give it a second chance or to see it for the first time, you can read the Target book from 1976 and its audiobook adaptation from 2007, both titled as Doctor Who and the Dinosaur Invasion. In terms of watching it, it was one of the last stories to be released on VHS in 2003, and it was released on DVD in 2012 as part of the Unit Files box set. Invasion of the Dinosaurs may not be the most well-realised Doctor Who story of all time, but it's one brimming with imagination, many a strong action moment, and a cast of regulars giving their A-game, treating the situation with a level of seriousness that helps make this feel less corny than it should. It's absolutely worth a watch in my view, and for those of you who haven't seen it in a while, give it another chance. Hopefully you won't be too disappointed.
It's not the oil and the filth and the poisonous chemicals that are the real cause of pollution, Brigadier. It's simply greed.
The third story from Season 11 is Death to the Daleks. A power drain strands the TARDIS on the desolate planet Exelon. The Doctor and Sarah join a human expedition who are in search of perineum, a rare mineral that could save millions of lives. But the Daleks arrive and want the perineum for themselves. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 23rd of February 1974 and concluded on the 16th of March. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and these are some pretty strong numbers overall, I would say. The peak of the story crosses that 10 million barrier once again, with Part 3 claiming 10.5 million viewers. Even the lowest viewed episode, Part 1, brought in 8.1 million, which in comparison is more than most individual episodes of the Patrick Troughton era. So even not reaching the heights achieved by stories in Season 10, this is far from a failure. In terms of the top 40 programmes, Parts 2 to 4 found their spot within that chart, Part 3 being victorious, coming in at 20th place. So what was it about Death to the Daleks that helped retain and in places increase Doctor Who's viewership? Well, the Daleks themselves continued to be a dominant force in terms of gaining ratings for the programme. Having appeared in the last 2 seasons, older viewers were happy seeing the classic favourites from the black and white era reimagined for the 1970s, whereas newer viewers had gotten the chance to experience the Pepper Potts for the very first time, and finding them just as menacing and captivating as people did back in the 60s. Despite Death to the Daleks arguably having the least promotion out of the Pertwee Dalek tales, the numbers we saw earlier showed that the impact of featuring the monsters was still very much valid. In terms of competition over at ITV, For most regions, it was the same programs that went up against the Time Warrior and Invasion of the Dinosaurs. There was one new contender, Reg Varney, but again, not even he could spell disaster for Doctor Who. In terms of the story itself, Death to the Daleks is either affectionately loved by fans or derided as a piece of absolute drivel. In my view, whilst it isn't my favourite Dalek story, I still find it has a lot of elements that are enjoyable today, and that silver trim the Daleks have is quite appealing to the eye. Even at the time of broadcast back in 1974, this story was receiving positive praise from members of the BBC's Programme Review Board. Director of Programmes, Alistair Milne, claimed that he had found it an exceptionally frightening adventure. And I mean, can you blame him? Look at this. You tell me this isn't frightening, I dare you. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9.4 million viewers, a 0.2 drop from the previous story. This makes it a third successive Dalek adventure from the Pertwee era to bring in a figure above 9 million, with Day of the Daleks having 9.6 and Planet of the Daleks pipping it with 9.7. This average, if anything, proved that not only were the Daleks still popular, but Doctor Who's popularity as a whole and audience loyalty was holding, if not growing, inch by inch. After nearly 5 years, viewers had not only warmed to Jon Pertwee's Doctor, but for many had accepted him as the definitive Doctor. And having faced the Daleks now not once, not twice, but 3 times, it was a claim that many at the time found hard to ignore. To enjoy Death to the Daleks today, you can read the Target book from 1978, or its audio adaptation from 2016. To watch it, you have 2 VHS releases, a compilation edition from 1987, and an unedited, episodic version from 1995. Alternatively, you can also watch it on DVD, thanks to a release from 2012. Whether you like Death to the Daleks or not, you can't deny that it's a very watchable adventure. The Exelon world is fascinating, and the Daleks are back to being a bit more cunning and manipulative when forced to ally with the humans, and there is many a notable and quotable moment. Such as this. How could you forget the most iconic Doctor Who cliffhanger of all time?
Stop, don't move.
The fourth and penultimate story from Season 11 is the Monster of Peladon. The Doctor makes a return trip to the planet Peladon. Now a member of the Galactic Federation, Peladon is a source of trisilicate, which is essential in the war with Galaxy 5, but mining is being disrupted by apparitions of Peladon's sacred beast, Agador. This story is comprised of 6 episodes, which began airing on the 23rd of March 1974 and concluded on the 27th of April. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 6 episodes, and oof, we seem to be facing quite a dip here. Part 1 starts out strong and in the vein of the previous few stories, with 9.2 million viewers tuning in. However, with Part 2, over 2 million viewers were lost, bringing in this story's weakest point of 6.8 million. Over the next 4 weeks, the numbers do build back up, mostly coming in within the 7 million range, before Part 6 goes one further, pulling in 8.1 million viewers. In terms of the top 40 programmes, Parts 1, 4 and 6 all charted, Part 1 placing the highest at 23rd. So despite a strong start and finish, what caused numbers to dip so drastically so early on in the story's run? Well, promotion was pretty lackluster, with the Monster of Peladon only receiving small pieces of artwork in the Radio Times to promote each episode in its corresponding week. There was no special TV trailer either, but in fairness, there didn't seem to be much of that extra leg of promotion for Season 11 as a whole. Perhaps the BBC, or whoever was in charge of promotion, felt that with this bumper success of Season 10 and the numbers it drew in, that maybe Doctor Who had become one of those programmes that sells itself, so to speak. But if promotion wasn't a factor, then competition certainly could have been. For Parts 1 and 2, most ITV regions were screening the Reg Varney review, whilst others showed off Candid Camera. However, from Part 3 onwards, most regions decided to carry talent show New Faces, which was very popular. Having said that, for Doctor Who to still be consistently bringing in 7 million viewers against such popular opposition is certainly commendable. Or, on a purely theoretical level, perhaps viewers just didn't take to this story after Part 1 went out. Despite being a pseudo-sequel to Season 9's The Curse of Peladon, as mentioned, the promotional run for this story didn't really seem to focus on that. When it comes to the Monster of Peladon and the drop in viewing figures, on this occasion I think it's fair to say it could have been a combination of many factors. But it is nice to see that by the story's end, the programme had regained over half of that initial 2 million drop. The story itself is often overlooked when compared to its predecessor 2 years earlier, and whilst yes, it arguably is a bit too long at 6 parts instead of Curse's 4, it still does provide a lot of substance for the viewer. Just as Curse had drawn parallels to the UK joining the EU, Monster draws on the striking action at the time of the miners, who for many years in the 70s were at a constant battle with the establishment for better wages for the work they were carrying out. The Ice Warriors return too, back to a more villainous role, but it's nice to see them be threatening again, as this would actually turn out to be their last on-screen appearance for nearly 40 years. Overall, this story attracted an average of 7.7 million viewers, a 1.7 million drop from the previous story. This is quite a staggering decline at first glance, but as I've mentioned across the past few episodes of the series, to attain an average like that across a 6-week adventure, going up against strong competition no less, is downright impressive. The Monster of Peladon may be derided as being one of the most forgettable stories of the Pertwee era, but I would defend it and say it's worth a second look. To experience that second look, you can read the Target book from 1980, or its audiobook adaptation from 2020. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1995, or the DVD release from 2010 as part of the Peladon Tales box set. It's rare in the classic era of Doctor Who for sequel stories to be attempted, let alone with the same Doctor, so to see the Monster of Peladon pick up where Curse left off and continue to expand on that world, its cultures and its problems is an absolute joy to watch. The return of the Ice Warriors in a more monster-esque role is a treat for those who loved their escapades in the 60s, and the bond between the Third Doctor and Sarah only continues to strengthen. And it's a pity in a way, as this would be the penultimate story featuring the duo. For Jon Pertwee, for his Doctor, his time was about to come. The fifth and final story from Season 11 is Planet of the Spiders. Reaching out across space and time, the giant spiders of Metebelis III are searching for a rare blue crystal, previously stolen from their world by the Doctor. Determined to thwart the spiders' plans, the Doctor must ultimately face his greatest fear. This story is comprised of 6 episodes, which began airing on the 4th of May 1974 and concluded on the 8th of June. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 6 episodes, and it's nice to see that the numbers are looking nice and strong as the Pertwee era closes out. Part 1 provides one last break into the 10 million range, and with the lowest figure being Part 4's 8.2 million, it's clear that the majority of the audience were here to stay and see out the last adventure for the Third Doctor. For the top 40 TV programmes, all 6 parts chart comfortably, with Part 1 placing highest at 17th. So how did Planet of the Spiders achieve such a consistent showing to close out the Jon Pertwee years? Well, in terms of promotion, there was surprisingly not that much of it for the actual story itself. You had the usual pieces of artwork in the Radio Times listings, but there was no front cover, no special trailer. However, you could argue that Planet of the Spiders promoted itself, or rather a specific aspect of itself, months prior. The specific aspect being the departure of Jon Pertwee. When looking up or referencing this story at the time, the prevailing line to describe it is the fact that this is the Third Doctor's swan song, and to be fair, that's probably all this story needed to pull in a vast chunk of its audience. For anyone who even casually watched Doctor Who during the Pertwee years, it would have arguably had a passing interest in seeing how the character was to bow out. But with this TV event upcoming, did competition at ITV attempt to seriously prepare to fight it? The short answer is, not really. Most regions were showing stuff that had been consistently battling Season 11, namely the talent show New Faces. Also, keep in mind, Planet of the Spiders was going out in May and June, a transition period leading into British summertime, a time frame that even in 1974 still often resulted in less people on average tuning into their favourite programmes. In short though, Planet of the Spiders was far more than just a regular season finale at the time of its broadcast. This was the end of an era of colossal success for Doctor Who, going from near cancellation in 1969 to testing the waters with a big shake-up in 1970 all the way up to 1974. Where episodes of the show were consistently bringing in 8, 9, even over 10 million viewers week after week. As a story itself, I would argue Planet of the Spiders is far from perfect, but it's a summary of everything the show stood for and had achieved over the past few years. There's one last hurrah for the unit regulars, alongside their most familiar Doctor. Part 2 is a love letter to this era's love of vehicles and gadgetry, and Jon Pertwee gives one last stellar performance, proving that whilst his Doctor may be a bit sterner and more authoritative, he is still willing to do what it takes to make things right, and to protect those he cares for. Absolutely splendid. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9 million viewers, a 1.3 million increase from the previous story. Whilst the averages for Season 11 stories have jumped up and down a bit, it's reassuring to see that for the Third Doctor's last battle, he came out with one of the strongest averages of his era. 9 million viewers on average tuned in to see him fight against the giant spiders. That's 3.4 million more than those who tuned in to see him escape a parallel world in Inferno only 4 years earlier. A testament to how this period of the show gradually became a roaring success across its 5 seasons. We also have some repeat data for you. On the 27th of December, 1974, it was decided that Planet of the Spiders would be that year's Christmas time omnibus repeat, a practice that had begun in 1971 with a repeat of The Demons, and one that had proved to be an enormous rating success for 3 years running. However, Planet of the Spiders was chosen arguably for a more significant purpose, as the very next day, the 28th of December, would mark the transmission of Part 1 of Robot, the very first story for the newly regenerated 4th Doctor. So, to repeat the final adventure of the preceding Doctor the day before the arrival of the new one, that's some good marketing if you ask me. Here are the viewing figures for this compilation repeat, and whilst not being the highest of these re-airings, 8.6 million is still a very strong figure, especially for a repeat. But you no longer have to wait for repeats, as if you wish to enjoy Planet of the Spiders today, you can read it via the Target book from 1975, or its audio adaptation from 2009. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1991, or as a standalone DVD from 2011. If you're a fan of the Earthbound formula of the Pertwee years, the Planet of the Spiders couldn't be a better swan song for you to enjoy. Whilst there are jumps off world too, it's a nice blending of what this era started, rooted firmly at Earth and with Unit, and with the Doctor's freedom being restored and his jaunts off-world becoming more of a regular occurrence again. I feel it may be a tad too long, but it's no less entertaining and provides a very fitting and heroic end to arguably the suavest, most action-packed Doctor yet.
Look, Brigadier, look! I think it's starting.
Well, here we go again.
So that's Season 11, the 5 stories that comprise it, and the ratings that they garnered. With the transmission of Episode 6 of Planet of the Spiders, Season 11 was brought to an end, concluding a near 6-month run, comprised of 26 episodes across 5 stories. All 26 of those episodes still exist today in the BBC archives, and only one of them had to undergo any kind of colour recovery, this being Part 1 of Invasion of the Dinosaurs. One method in which colour had been restored to Jon Pertwee episodes was via the process of chroma dot recovery. This technique was used on stories such as The Mind of Evil and Planet of the Daleks. However, with this episode of Invasion of the Dinosaurs, whilst the red and green colour signals were present, the blue signal was not. So, when this story was being prepared for a DVD release, a mix of chroma dot recovery and manual colorization was pursued, to try and achieve the best result possible. And whilst the result isn't up to DVD standard, it is presented as an optional extra, the high quality black and white version being the default. To learn about the process of chroma dot recovery and the fascinating history behind how many Pertwee stories came back to the archives, then I recommend watching the fantastic documentary made by Josh Snares. He explains it much better than I ever could, that's for sure. Now let's take a look at the story averages for this season. We're breaking traditions here, as the highest average doesn't come from the season opener, but instead comes from Invasion of the Dinosaurs with a 9.6 million figure. The lowest point comes with the Monster of Peladon, which pulled in 7.7 million on average. Whilst these numbers may seem a bit erratic, I would argue they're still very healthy and commendable, especially for a show that by 1974 had been running for nearly 11 years. As mentioned, these viewing figures are truly a testament to how adaptable and different Doctor Who can be, whilst building up on factors that have clicked with audiences, and continuing to push the boundaries in televisual storytelling. Now, as we always do, let's work out the overall average for this season. By combining the average ratings of each story, we can calculate that the average for Season 11 of Doctor Who stands at around roughly 8.8 million viewers. It's not the highest season average we've encountered on our journey, but it only falls behind Season 2's 10.4 million and Season 10's 9 million, so a bronze medal for now is very commendable indeed. Let's have a look at how Season 11 did when compared to the rest of the Pertwee era. As you can see, it actually ranks the second highest of the season averages, just behind Season 10. Further testament to how the audience numbers not only grew during the 1970s, but also how they stayed, how they were captivated, and how they were intrigued to see what adventures awaited the Doctor next. But now, as we've reached the end of another Doctor's era, it's time we got really nerdy with numbers and figure out the overall average for the Pertwee years. By combining the results achieved from seasons 7 through 11, we can calculate that the average viewing figures for the Jon Pertwee era of Doctor Who stand at around roughly 8.3 million viewers. This means that the Pertwee era is the most viewed on average thus far, pipping the Hartnell era by 0.4 million and the Troughton era by 1.2 million. Whilst Hartnell may have had several stories average over 10 million, Pertwee's era is more successful as a whole because the numbers were arguably far more consistent. Think about it. Of the 24 Jon Pertwee stories that were broadcast on TV, only one story gained an average of less than 7 million viewers, that being the season 7 finale, Inferno. Compare that to the 29 William Hartnell stories, and you'll find that 11 of them averaged less than 7 million. So, of the 3 eras we've covered so far, the Jon Pertwee years take the crown not only for being the most viewed on average, but also for being the most continuously strong and consistent. Season 11 was a culmination of everything that made the Jon Pertwee era of Doctor Who a roaring success for the 70s. Building off the newfound freedom to travel space and time that was established in Season 10, these last few stories for the Third Doctor don't forget to give the audience a balanced mix. You have the escapade into the past with the Time Warrior, off-world encounters with classic monsters, but also a good dose of the Earthbound unit stories. Invasion of the Dinosaurs being a bit more traditional, whereas Planet of the Spiders feels like everything was crammed in to give the Third Doctor the best send-off possible. Jon Pertwee undoubtedly redefined the role for the show's launch into colour, and completely made it his own. He was cool, he was suave, he was authoritative, but also very caring and compassionate. He stood for what was right, and he was never cruel, and he was never cowardly. For millions of viewers, he was their definitive Doctor Who. And for many millions, he continued to be. Despite achieving massive success as children's icon Wurzel Gummidge, Jon was never shy in taking up the role again on several occasions. Whether it was for conventions, for commercials, even appearing on TV once again as part of the 20th anniversary story, The Five Doctors. He would embrace Doctor Who all the way up until his sad passing in 1996. He was 77 years old. But things don't last forever, and as he collapsed to the floor of the unit lab, the Third Doctor was gone, and the Fourth Doctor, played by the curly-haired Tom Baker, was now in his place. It would be 6 months before viewers could see this new Doctor in action, and with Season 12 going before the cameras, a new batch of stories were being crafted, some of which would go on to be some of the most iconic adventures in the show's long history. But would this new era continue the success established in the Pertwee years? Would it reach new heights, or would it crash and burn? You'll have to join me next time to find out the answer to that one.
Goodbye.
So those are the ratings details for Season 11. I hope you enjoyed this numerical look back at the final year of the Third Doctor, and that you give some of these tales, those looked at a bit more scornfully, a second chance. If you want to learn more about the recovery of Jon Pertwee era episodes, then again I recommend Josh Snares' documentary, which can be enjoyed either episodically or as an omnibus. If you want to read more about Doctor Who and the making of it, I highly recommend the Complete History series of books, which I used as reference for this video. If you want to keep up to date with this series, you can by following me on Twitter and Instagram, and if you want to see new episodes of the series early, then you can by supporting us over on the AMTV Patreon. Please consider leaving us a like, subscribing to the channel, and leaving your thoughts on Season 11 in the comments section below. I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV, and we will see you next time for Season 12.